Well, with us on the line is Tommy Pigott, the Rapid Response Director for the RNC. Tommy, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. How about you?
Doing well. And Tommy, I think we talk about this every time. It's Pigott, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But honestly, we probably mispronounce it on my end. So you can say whatever you like. It doesn't matter to me.
I had a neighbor named Pigott when I was a kid. So that's what, maybe by the fourth or fifth time I've had you on, I'll start pronouncing your name right. So
don't worry about it. It's all okay. It's all good.
How are things in, are you in D.C. or where are you?
I'm in D.C. right now, yeah.
Okay. Well, how are things there?
They're doing great. I mean, we all watched the debate last night, obviously, so we're feeling pumped here. I mean, what a great kickoff officially to this nominating cycle. I mean, I don't think we could have asked for a better one.
What was the take at the RNC of how the debate went, and whether obviously it serves a primary purpose of helping voters choose who they're going to vote for in the various nominating contests across the country, but it also, I think, frames up the competition there's going to be between the Republican nominee and Joe Biden a year from now. I mean, what was y'all's take on the debate?
I think that was the big takeaway, what was the contrast between Joe Biden and the Republican candidates. I mean, they talked about the economy, talked about how Joe Biden's policies have failed in the economy. They talked about the border, talked about foreign policy, talking about how Biden's made us weaker on the world stage. On issue after issue, you saw a really major contrast between Republicans, who are really with the majority of the American people, versus Joe Biden, who, instead of securing the border, wants to open it. There's so many issues that Biden's out of touch with the American people on. And this debate really showed that we're not just criticizing Joe Biden for his failed policies, even though they're deserving of being criticized. There are real solutions Republicans are putting forward to solve these problems.
How was the viewership last night?
The viewership was great. I mean, the audience hall itself was packed with thousands of people. You had viewership across Rumble, hundreds of thousands of people watching there, millions on Fox News. We don't know the exact viewership numbers yet, but the viewership was great. And I think it's because people are hungry for that alternative. They're hungry for an alternative to the 2.5 years we've had of Joe Biden so far, which have been a complete disaster.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right about that. And I know you and your role at the RNC, you play a big role in this. I mean, with Biden, you talk about the border, and it's just one example of many. His policies are failing, but he says, look, my policies are succeeding, and you've got this sort of mainstream media echo chambers that are happy to write long-form pieces explaining how, in fact, the border is closed, even though there are hundreds of thousands of people every day pouring across the border. The economy is doing well, even though we know that people are struggling out there because of the runaway inflation. And so I know that's a big part of what you do is try to correct the false narratives that are out there.
I mean, that's exactly right. One of the big things that we've done as a committee is start factcheckbiden.com, because the mainstream media wasn't fact-checking Joe Biden when you go out there and blatantly lie about things, a lot of things you just mentioned in terms of the border. So we started this website. We update it almost every day because Joe Biden lies almost every day. The only days that he doesn't lie is when he hides from the media entirely, like he is right now in Lake Tahoe. So basically, we're holding him accountable. And I think you're exactly right to point out that many in the mainstream media, it's almost like the more words they say, the less true that is, because they're trying to explain away common sense. They're trying to explain away what is so obvious to so many Americans on the economy when they go to the grocery store, the gas station, when they see their real wages declining, or on the border, where no reasonable person can say we have operational control of the border. Border Patrol itself is telling us that we don't, and we can't say that when you have fentanyl coming across the border and poisoning Americans across this country at a record rate. And I think the real worrying thing is if Joe Biden thinks that is a success, what can we possibly expect from a second term? He's going to double down and make these same issues worse. And so I think it was so great to hear from these Republican candidates yesterday saying, enough's enough. We got to secure this border. We got to rein in this inflation. We got to stand up to communist China. We can't be sending our Treasury Secretary over there to literally bow to communist China. We cannot be doing that. So I think it was a real contrast, an exciting kickoff. And I think at the end of this long road, we're going to beat Joe Biden.
Well, I certainly hope so. And the media double standard just constantly blows me away. I mean, you saw 4 years ago, we got the New York Times running long pieces about whether Ivanka Trump had violated federal law by holding up a can of pinto beans. But you don't see any sort of deep dives on Hunter Biden selling these mediocre paintings to anonymous bidders for just massive amounts of money. I mean, maybe it's not corruption, but it sure as heck looks like it's an attempt to buy influence with the president. And there just seems to be an awful lot of smoke around there and not a whole lot of coverage because he's a Democrat.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, Hunter Biden, with no experience as a quote-unquote artist, selling quote-unquote art to people connected to the Democratic Party. In one instance, we had one of the buyers of his so-called art being appointed to a prestigious commission. I mean, there are so many, at the very least, coincidences that should be investigated. I think, like you said, there's a lot of smoke here, not to mention the fact that the mainstream media completely bought into the spin without any evidence from Joe Biden that Hunter Biden's laptop was misinformation. He went out there, we find out later that they communicated with the intelligence community or former intel communities, got this letter out there with no evidence to claim that it was Russian disinformation. Then the media and big tech worked to censor it. It's the same exact pattern we've seen time and time again. I keep on seeing these journalists go out there and tweet, there's no evidence that Joe Biden was involved or benefited from Hunter Biden's business schemes. And I'm thinking to myself, no evidence? There's bank records showing that the Biden family received $20 million. Almost everyone, including the dog, got money practically from foreign overseas adversaries. And I guarantee you Biden's grandchildren are not offering a tangible service to receive that money from communist China and other entities. I mean, they're just not. What they're selling is Joe Biden, not to mention the visitors logs, the photos, the voicemails, the letter that Joe Biden sent to Devin Archer. The list goes on and on. So for them to go out there and claim no evidence, it's beyond sticking their head in the sand. It's willful ignorance at this point.
Yeah, well, and it's the reason that people have lost so much faith in the mainstream media, and the reason these alternative platforms, I think, have sort of exploded is because people realize they're these corporate gatekeepers that aren't always interested in telling you the truth. They're interested in selling their story, whatever it happens to be, irrespective of whether they're actually giving you facts. Well, if you want to be part of the conversation here, join us on the C Spire text line at 601-879-4395. Tommy, I'd be interested for you to talk a little bit about what the RNC's role is in selecting the Republican nominee for president, because I think a lot of times people think you guys actually make the choice, or you all are in a position to sort of put your thumb on the scales and help one person or another become the nominee. So I think it would be somewhat helpful to talk about what the National Committee's role is.
Well, it's just the opposite. We do not put our thumb on the scale. We are entirely neutral in this process. We do not select the nominee. Republican voters select the nominee. Our job as an RNC right now is to, when this nomination process is over, have our nominee be in the best possible position to beat Joe Biden in 2024. That is our mission. That is our focus. So as we go around this nominating process, it's not putting any thumb on the scale. It's being completely neutral, letting Republican voters decide who they want to represent them. But then once Republican voters make the decision, make sure that on day one, the day they secure the nomination, if not even before when we have multiple candidates, all these candidates can take it to Joe Biden right away. So one of the things that we're doing, for example, instead of, we're not selecting the nominee at all, we're building out that infrastructure that the nominee can then tap into once they're the nominee. So, for example, bankyourvote.com is one of our big initiatives. If we build out this infrastructure, build out these grassroots connections, start getting people to go to bankyourvote.com to take the pledge to vote early, the nominee can then take that infrastructure that we've been building ahead of when they're the nominee and start the ground running. They can hit the ground right away, go and towards taking it towards Joe Biden, and then hopefully with that infrastructure, they will beat Joe Biden. So that's our role as an RNC, is to make sure that our nominee, whoever that is, whoever Republican voters select, is in the best possible position to beat Joe Biden.
So this was the first debate, but obviously not the last debate. When is the next debate? Who's going to be moderating that one? Where can people watch it?
Well, it's going to be with our partners Fox Business and Rumble. It's going to be in California at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library Institute. It's going to be September 27th is going to be the date of that debate. We couldn't be more excited for that debate as well. I think this debate showed that Republican candidates have a lot to say and a lot to share. And I think it also showed that Americans are hungry to hear from these candidates. So we got that second debate coming up. Couldn't be more excited for that one as well, because I think last night showed that we're ready to get this nomination process going. We've gotten it going now, and we're ready to beat Joe Biden.
Tommy, have y'all set what the requirements are going to be on the stage for the September debate, or is that still being discussed?
So the requirements have been set. They're slightly higher than they were for the first debate, but along the general theme of grassroots donors, polling averages, and the Beat Biden pledge. Ultimately, I think Republican voters expect, as we get closer to casting ballots, as we get closer to these primaries, that there's going to be higher and higher standards to make sure that they're actually hearing from people that have the best chance of winning the nomination. Because ultimately, you want these debates to serve a purpose to the American people, to the Republican voters, to say, I want to be able to hear from these candidates. I want to be actually able to hear what they have to say over that 2-hour period.
We're coming up on a break. Tommy, you got time for one more segment with us?
Yeah, sure.
It sounds great. This is Lucian Smith in for Paul Gallo here on the Gallo Radio Show on SuperTalk, Mississippi. Good morning, everybody. This is Lucian Smith in for Paul Gallo here on the Gallo Radio Show on SuperTalk, Mississippi. We're coming to you live from the Trustmark Bank studio. Life's beautiful when your bank fits you to a T. Trustmark, people you trust, advice that works. To learn more, go to trustmark.com, member FDIC. Well, with us for a second segment is Tommy Pigott, the Rapid Response Director for the RNC. Tommy, you were talking about this a little bit before the break. To get into this debate, you had to meet certain thresholds for the number of donors you had in a certain number of states, the amount that you were seeing in polling, but also the Beat Biden pledge. What is the Beat Biden pledge?
Well, like I said in the last segment, it's about making sure that our nominee is in the best possible position to beat Joe Biden. So the Beat Biden pledge is saying that whoever the Republican voters select as their nominee, if you're going to be on that Republican National Committee debate stage, you need to take that pledge to support that nominee and to take the pledge to beat Joe Biden and help beat Joe Biden in 2024. Ultimately, I think that's what Republican voters want. We have to keep our eye on the prize, in a sense, to say that we cannot afford 4 more years of Joe Biden. 2.5 years, which we've had right now, is too much already. So we need that pledge to make sure that our nominee is in the best possible position to take it to Joe Biden and beat him in 2024.
And obviously, everybody on that stage has taken it. Has former President Trump taken the Beat Biden pledge at this point? I know he declined to participate in the debate.
He hasn't signed the pledge this cycle yet, but he signed it in the past, and he's gone back and forth in terms of whether or not he would actually sign that pledge. We're confident that Republican voters and President Trump all know the importance of beating Biden in 2024. I think that's a unifying principle across the Republican Party, that we need to have our nominee in the best possible position. And we need to make sure that we are really taking it to Joe Biden and not letting Joe Biden get 4 more years in the White House.
How big of a concern is that President Trump, say he doesn't win the nomination, decides to run as create a third party and split conservative voters? I mean, that has to be a source of concern for the RNC as we head into 24.
Well, I don't necessarily want to be getting so far ahead of myself to speculate that far in advance. There's no indication that would happen at this point. I think ultimately, though, Republican voters across the spectrum, anyone really, independent voters, even many Democrats right now, all know the importance of making Joe Biden a one-term president. Only 20% of Americans want Joe Biden to run for re-election and win re-election. That's it, 20%. The rest of America wants Joe Biden to be a one-term president. I think that's a unifying force across the Republican Party, across conservatives, across independents, across moderate Democrats. There are so many people that know, millions of Americans, that we cannot afford 4 more years of Joe Biden. So I'm confident when we have that Republican nominee, the Republican nominee will be the next president of the United States of America.
So we've got a debate coming up in a little over a month, as you mentioned. In terms of the process, for people who unlike you and me, don't live and breathe this sort of stuff. I mean, talk a little bit about the process of when the elections will actually happen that'll select the delegates who'll select the nominee.
Well, basically, there are these primary or caucus operations that happen in each state that then elect a certain amount of delegates. Some of them are winner-take-all states. Some of them are proportional. But basically, we all know we started with Iowa and New Hampshire as the 2 states that go first. That's going to be at the beginning of next year for that to happen. Basically, though, we're going to go through this process. You're going to have those caucus, that first primary, and then start competing in state after state. And then the big day, in terms of the first big day where multiple states go, is Super Tuesday, which I'm sure many of your listeners have heard from, where a lot of delegates are awarded on that day. So basically, you kind of have these debates now. You introduce yourself to voters. You hear a lot about candidates spending a lot of time in New Hampshire, spending a lot of time in Iowa, because those are the first states that, or some of the first states that really go in terms of electing their delegates to elect the nominee. And then once a candidate has secured enough delegates, they presumptively secure the nomination, and then they are effectively and officially nominated in Milwaukee next year in July at the Republican National Convention.
Talk a little bit about the bank your vote, which you mentioned in the first segment, but a little bit more about what that is and what people ought to do to be supportive of that effort.
Well, Bank Your Vote is the RNC's initiative, partnering with presidential candidates, the other committees. President Trump himself has endorsed it, to really educate, encourage, and activate Republican voters to bank their votes as early as possible. Obviously, that changes by the state. So part of the Bank Your Vote effort is, if you go to bankyourvote.com, we're building out these state-specific pages. So if you go and you take the pledge to bank your vote, you'll be notified when your state-specific page is built out. And that gives you all the resources you need to, how can I vote early, absentee, or in person in my specific state? And a lot of people, I understand, are a bit hesitant to vote early. But part of this Bank Your Vote effort is the Protect Your Vote effort. We built out an unprecedented election integrity operation in 2022. We are continuing that effort. And if by going to bankyourvote.com, then people can join the effort to protect your vote by volunteering to be a poll observer, for example. And then on top of it all, you might be asking yourself, if I'm going to vote on election day, why do I need to vote early? Well, the main reason why is because it lets us focus our resources. If you vote the first day that you can vote early, we no longer have to chase your ballot. We no longer have to knock on your door, call you in order to get your vote out. We can use all of those resources to target voters that maybe haven't voted yet, haven't voted in recent elections, but are likely to vote Republican. That frees up a ton of money and manpower to go out there and get that turnout. So even if you know you're going to vote on election day, even though it's hard to know exactly what might happen on a given day, make sure you get out and vote early. Take that pledge to vote early because it lets us target our resources to get out as many voters as possible and elect Republicans up and down the ballot.
Because you hit on something there that's right. I know a lot of, especially conservative voters, are hesitant to vote early because they're worried about whether their vote's going to actually be counted. And it sounds like we're doing a good job both of getting or trying to get those votes in, but also make sure that they're secure and being fairly counted.
Well, I think one of the best ways to make sure your vote counts is to actually vote early, in the sense of, look what happened at Maricopa County in Arizona. You had voting machines that were broken on the day of the election. If that happens the first day of early voting, you might want to stay in line and make sure you get voted that day, but you can also go the next day and vote. Election day is the last day. So if you want to make sure that you actually get your vote in, make sure you vote early. Also, for personal reasons, you don't know what might happen at work, what might happen with your family. Making sure you bank your vote early is an important way of getting it counted. And yes, exactly, that Protect Your Vote effort. We have thousands of poll observers or poll watchers we had in terms of the last election. We're going to be having a similar operation in 2024. We're also involved in lawsuits across the country to really stop bad faith Democrat attempts to undermine our election integrity. We're fighting on all cylinders to make sure that it's harder to cheat and easier to vote in America, because that's what voters expect. But the most important way to protect your vote is to bank your vote. And that's why everyone listening should go to bankyourvote.com, sign up, take the pledge, help us target those resources, help us protect the vote, and help us elect Republicans.
Given, and I think we've seen electoral consequences of some of the rhetoric that's been out there, that people are concerned that their votes won't be counted, that the system's not fair. I mean, as we go into 24, how confident are you? How confident is the RNC that the election in 2024 is going to be fair, that only actual votes will be counted, and that every actual vote is going to be counted, and that we can trust the results that come out next year?
We don't have confidence in the abstract as if it's going to sort of magically happen. We're fighting on all cylinders, like I said, to have that massive election integrity operation, to have those poll observers, to be engaged in lawsuits across the country. But once the rules are set, once the rules of the game are set in given states, we cannot fight with one hand tied behind our back. We have to fight with both hands. So if it's California, if that's legal ballot harvesting, we have to engage in that effort. We cannot surrender 3/4 of a 4-quarter game to the Democrats. We can't wait till the fourth quarter to start putting points on the board. We need to be putting points on the board every single quarter. We need to be fighting, like I said, with both of our hands in front of us, and that's what we're going to be doing. But importantly to say, we just don't have confidence in the abstract. We're going to be fighting to make sure that in America, it's hard to cheat and easy to vote, and that's exactly what we've been fighting to do with our election integrity operation.
But do you feel confident that the RNC is going to do what's necessary, that people can trust the outcome of the election next year?
We will do everything possible to make sure we're doing what's necessary. It's kind of hard to imagine what problems might arise or what might exactly happen, but we are doing everything possible to make sure that you can have confidence. And I can say with confidence, banking your vote is the best way to protect your vote. So I can say that 100% with confidence, that's the best way to do it. But we are doing everything we possibly can to make sure you have that confidence. And if that's a concern for voters, the important thing that they can do is join the team to protect your vote by going to bankyourvote.com. Because we need those poll observers and those poll watchers. The best way to help us secure these elections in terms of election integrity, having a fair and transparent process, is to go to bankyourvote.com. We are not going to leave any cards on the table. We are going to do everything we possibly can to make sure that we have election integrity in 2024.
So vote early, but not often is essentially the goal as we go to 24.
Not often, but definitely vote early. Definitely vote early.
Tommy, we've got about 15 seconds left. Any final thoughts before we go to break?
I just wanted to stress again, bankyourvote.com. I could not stress the one thing that anyone could do today to help us elect Republicans is take that pledge. It is so important.
Hey, well, Tommy, thank you for taking the time to be with us. We've had Tommy Pigott, the Rapid Response Director for the Republican National Committee, one of the people who's going to be working hard to hold Joe Biden accountable and make sure that he is out of public housing after the 24 election.